searching for my mute button and I happen to be on air. Funny thing how that works. Welcome back to another episode of PresbyCast. Once again, this dump truck, which may or may not be on fire, is once again without the use of its brakes, and the grade is steepening. So as we hurtle into the summer months, at least here in North America, here we are. I always try to get so eloquent with these openings, and no one really comes here for my eloquence anyways, usually quite the opposite. So, here we are. We've got some familiar guests in Zoe. So here we are. Let's talk about PCAGA Overtures for the third time.
Yeah, we're going to have a record number of Overture shows. We may have the esteemed Fred Greco on next week, but this week we have the esteemed Reverends Jared Nelson and Scott Edburg. And they are out there. They're experts in their field, and sometimes if you go down the right rural highway in Indiana or the Pittsburgh area, you'll see them outstanding in a field, looking confused and dazed, but probably with a phone in their hands, checking the latest socials on the old PCA General Assembly. Well, why do we talk so much about the PCA? Well, it's 10 times bigger than most of the rest of NAPARC, and not being the OPC has one overture this year, I think. So that just means they're settled and stable, and we are not. There are 46 overtures on the website. I know of there are at least 2 more in the pipeline, and if there are 2 more, there are probably 6 more. So we're getting into the low 50s this year. So third overture show. Scott, you were on one of the earlier ones, the first one?
Yeah, when we were launching the Overtures in
That's right.
March, you had the March episode.
Yeah, I knew there were so many we would have to start early, and we did. And Jared couldn't make the last one, but we knew he would catch up. And also, tell us what Polity Matters is doing with Overtures. You've had one show on Overtures so far? Is that right?
No, we're waiting until June until they all come in, really.
Oh, okay. Well, that's one way to do it.
What a decently and efficient use of time. I was unaware that you could just do that. Just wait for them all to come in. What a novel idea.
Well,
you can just do things.
There's more than one way to do things, yes. So we have 2/5 of the Presby girls here tonight. Zoe is with us, and we hope she'll behave. I guess that's what we should say.
If by behave you mean deliver completely unsolicited opinions on overtures that I can't vote on, then yes. I'm here to behave.
Zoe, being the wife of a PCA minister, is utterly disenfranchised except for the power to tell her husband how to vote, which she wouldn't do, but advice she would freely give.
Oh, if he were here, he would be nodding vigorously right now.
Well, he's a tall guy, so when he nods, I'm sure it's there's a lot of air movement.
I'll give you $25 if at some point you yell, "Seth, vote yes" on something, as long as it picks up by a mic.
Oh,
$25 to the charity of your choice,
and then that will be preserved in GA history forever.
Well, speaking of GA history, Zoe may be
do it twice.
Zoe may be the first female floor clerk in the history of the PCA. And how many years have you done it? 3-4 years you've done it?
Yeah, I've done it since 2021, so this will be my 4th year in a row. They keep asking me to come back for some reason.
And when she first did it, the first year, she dressed like a Staples associate. And then she found the lovely Seth, and now she doesn't dress that way anymore.
That's why they asked me to come back again. They were like, "You're allowed now." I had the outfit that I had on when I met Seth for the first time was black slacks, black polo, and Sean Morris said that I looked like an Applebee's waitress.
Oh, okay.
And
well, I would have said Staples, but that's fine. Yeah.
Which I did work at Staples for a while, so that's a completely believable, something subconsciously rubbed off on my fashion choices, I guess. But thankfully, that black polo is now where it belongs, in a Goodwill bin somewhere. So
we bring you on for relatability to the common church member, and also a shameless attempt to raise our female percentage of viewership from 0.3% to 0.8%. That's the goal.
And that female viewership is raised by me. Like I'm on the show, but I'm also the
you can't watch it when you're on it. Yeah.
level of view. Like I have it on my phone right now so that I can use YouTube. I can be in the comments, but
Jared and I are texting about how much small talk goes on in this show compared to our own show.
Well, we're not that. We're only 7 minutes in, and a minute and a half of that was music. So yeah.
it's because I'm here, Scott. That's the service. Another one of those services that I provide.
This is how human beings relate to each other.
Yeah, I am the example of how people normally talk. Please copy me.
Scott, remember, they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Hurting people hurt people.
We love hurting
we
people.
love hurting people. Yes. Best church sign ever. Well, let's start hurting people with overtures. Now, just let me. Somebody said that I explain things too much on the show. We used to explain nothing, but I do feel the need.
It was better back then.
Sure, I'm sure it was. But an overture is a request from a lower court to a higher court to do something, to say something, to investigate something, to change something, change the Constitution or the rules, or make a statement, something. And that's what these are. And because, again, the PCA is diverse and ever unsettled. And like I tried to explain to my wife tonight, if you have 30 Presbyterians in a room, every one of them thinks they're the smartest, and every one of them thinks they have an idea that would fix the other 29. And these things aren't true, but it is what it is. That's our vibe in the PCA. So we've done 2 of these shows, but we're going to back up and pick up an overture, which I think we tried to explain before. But this is an interesting case study, Overture 22, and I'm going to put them on the screen for the live viewers, but we'll try to explain them. If you're playing at home, listening to this, there'll be a link in the show notes to the entire resource page of Overtures. Probably by the time you click on it, there'll be more than 46 on the page. But the first one is one that I've characterized as an attempt to reverse engineer a problem created by young child communion. If you don't know what that means there are churches that routinely allow very young children, 3, 4, 5 years old, into full communing membership. Well, it kind of, maybe it makes for some problems, which is 4-year-olds voting on officers. So I forget which one of you was most interested in this, Scott and Jared, but chime in and explain this one to us.
Yeah, this would allow a local congregation to set an age limit for when you can vote for officers. Right now, if you look at the BCO 6.4, basically when you become a communing member, you have all rights and privileges of the church. And this is partly based on, it seems, a principle, and a good principle of that in preliminary principle number 6, about the right of a society to elect its own officers. But this would allow for placing an age limit on that. Now, the overture isn't specific on what that age limit would be. You kind of assume that it would be like 18 legal age in America, but it may be different. I mean, we have PCA churches that are in Canada. We have PCA churches that are in other countries that are using our BCO. And so this could also be, 21 or 16, or I don't know, if you have some place that only wants elders to vote, 30, or AARP eligible 55.
I mean, I wasn't thinking 18. I was thinking 10 or 12. That'd be crazy to me to push it up that high. Now let me interject. You know, there is a denomination not in NAPARC that's all about pedo communion, which means, you know, infants and toddlers taking the supper, and the way they work around it is they have head of household voting. So, you know, in a family with a mother and a father, only the father votes. So that's you know, that's one of those we should think. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I'm saying pedo communion or young child communion, which I think the second, the latter, a young child, so called, is probably the reason for this. But you know, it raises the question: if if someone's old enough to take the membership vows, you know, you would think maybe they would be old enough to vote. So the problem may be that we're just allowing children who are too young into communing membership. So, any thoughts on that?
I know when I teach a communicants class, one of the things I emphasize is now you're going to have all these rights and privileges, but also responsibilities. And one of them is you're going to vote on who elders are. So we go through qualifications for elder, and this is something you need to think about, who your elders and deacons are going to be. I guess my one question, I think it's a good point that you brought up. Why age? You know, is that the only factor? Can you have a factor to limit voting by household? So you have household voting, or you have by gender, by a particular group. You want this to be ministering to a certain nationality. What's the limiting principle on this? This just does age, but right now our principle is if you're a communicant member, you have all the rights and privileges. I guess our question is, if we're going to change that, what's our limiting principle now? Is the next thing that somebody can say is, look, now that that's out the window, can our bylaws do other things? Should we just think about age, or should we think about some of these other qualifications for it?
Now, the be it resolved part is at the beginning. And the reason they did that is because at 19 pages, no one would have ever gotten to the business end of the overture if they'd put it at the end, which is the typical way to do. This is a 19-page overture, and more than 18 of those pages are devoted to the reason that the authors of the overture wanted done. I don't think we're going to pass a 19-page overture. That's just me. Scott, you got to have thoughts on this.
Some of it, I get the sentiment for some of it. There can be issues when you are dealing with controversial matters where children become pawns in political movements within congregations. And I could see why it could be very divisive or destructive to a church, to have someone who is really young being used as a pawn in a political scheme. I think that's probably the felt need of why this is being addressed, is probably those kind of issues. I think that gets back perhaps to what we've already talked about, which is do we admit? When is it prudent to admit people to the sealing ordinances? In some ways, we already do sometimes limit those who are under 18 from voting. In the state of Illinois, you can't be a member of a corporation unless you're 18. And so whenever matters of selling property or taking on mortgages or things of that nature come up, we have to tell our children that you're communing members, but legally you're not permitted to vote in this matter. And so it seems like there'd be an extension of that from that civil realm idea into the ecclesiastical realm. I think this is just too complicated. I know that perhaps other NAPARC denominations have some sort of form for this, but I think Jared's point is most salient when he talks about what is the top of the spectrum. This could be really abused in some circumstances, since there's no limiter for the age. It could be any age that we could set, 18, 20, 65, 72, whatever it may be. And so I don't really have much more thoughts than that. We've already talked about it, all the way back in March. I think this perhaps will probably be the one we debate maybe the most. I know Overture 9 will probably be debated quite a bit. I'd see this one. Us spending a lot of time on the Overtures committee debating it.
My thoughts on this have always been that, I've never been a member of a weird church, so maybe that colors my perspective. But you've got to think that parents could tell their child not to vote. In my opinion, the children are under the parents, and if the parent knows a child doesn't understand what's going on, even though they've been admitted, I think a parent could exercise some authority there. Also, I think if you have hand-marked ballots, I think maybe if you had a close vote on something, let's say you were calling a pastor, you'd like to have 90%, but you have 84%, but most of the no's are done with a crayon. Give the kids crayons to vote with, so then you can just throw those out. That may not be ethical, but you
so
could
they
have
a special kid election where the results aren't counted and they don't actually count, but they get to feel like they're part of the
Brad,
process.
did you just advocate for this overture?
No, I didn't. No.
Wait, can this be done at GA? But
if it's a young pastor, the kid voters get to choose a toy that he no doubt will try to display in his office. So,
but wouldn't it be weird if a church had children's church and the kids were hardly ever in the worship service and were hardly ever around the officers and the pastor, but then they brought them in to vote? Maybe if you have, I don't like children's church, but maybe you just don't bring the kids in from children's church. You forget. And yeah. Now, I think this, who knows? I said this is going to be an unpredictable and weird assembly. And if we debate this if Overtures debates this for 3 hours, that's going to be pretty weird. And yeah. And there, could be a minority report. And I think the person that wrote this is pretty skillful and could probably engineer something. So, or it may die.
A lot of source material to engineer something.
Yeah. All right. Zoe, any quick thoughts on this as a young
Zoe
person?
said she had a lot of hot takes on this overture before the show, so I'm waiting.
I have one or two, and number one is I think it's really funny that it's part of this overture. If it's passed, the 20-page rationale will be sent to all the presbyteries, which I think is hilarious because the overture is so that churches who believe that they need a voting age can have it, but churches who don't believe they need one will not be required to change their current practice. So for something that is supposedly so clear in history and polity that we should do, it's optional, but also the 20-page rationale should be sent to everybody. That's a little weird to me. I kind of understand some of the arguments for the overture. In a vacuum, a lot of it seems very reasonable. In history, they talk about the discernment equivalency assertion, which means that if a child has the ability to discern the Lord's Supper, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the ability to discern who would be a good elder candidate. And that actually makes sense.
Well, but that doesn't follow.
However,
that doesn't actually follow. That's an opinion. I don't think that's not automatic.
It isn't automatic, but you can make a reasonable case for that. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying, I could understand a reasonable argument for that. But the issue is, this overture is not written in a PCA that is totally a vacuum. And I don't think the issue is their argument for the practice of a voting age. The issue is trust. The reality of the state of things in the PCA is that we do not trust one another to set the right or just any sort of common practice when it comes to communion. And so it's really not I don't think, in my opinion, it's a good idea to entertain this overture because we don't have consensus as a denomination on the means by which we evaluate who's ready to receive communion. And so all other arguments are moot, in my opinion. we don't trust other churches to behave rightly, at least in my opinion, when it comes to setting the limitations on communion. And I'm not saying that my specific opinion about how you evaluate that is right, because I have no say. I'm a layperson. But, you know, this overture, it's not in a vacuum. If it were, maybe there could be an argument made for that. I know that if in the state of Washington, if your elders are part of the church corporation, you have to set a voting age. You have to set a voting limit for who can elect members of the corporation. And sometimes the way you get around that is you have lay people be members of the corporation. But anyway, all that to say, I don't agree with a lot of arguments in here, but some of them I can kind of get. But we don't have consensus on communion. I think that the argument that child membership can be abused to, for power tactics, that might be true, but in what way is that not the case, even if you do set a voting limit? Like the argument that voting privileges can be abused, therefore we should limit them.
How about we just limit the number of kids? You can't have more than 3 kids. Or
yes, that sounds very reasonable.
Or you have to pick the smartest 3 kids to vote. If you could have 10 kids, but only 3 can vote. How about that?
You get to choose your smartest kids who can pick who can vote.
Because we all know in a large family, there's always some duds.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Stop right there. It says
hold on. I have to tell the story because it's too good not to. Okay. In my opinion, of course, since it's my story. Guy at church has a large family. And I said to him, you got a lot of kids. I said, odds are one of them's going to be a serial killer. And he said, yeah, and I think I know which one it is. So, it was a joke, okay?
It's pretty funny.
I didn't say it was funny. All right, so you see we've been scrolling on the 19 pages, and we're only to page 5. Wow. So there's a lot of wordage here, as the young people say. There's certainly an argument, but I think it's an attempt to fix a mistake, which is admitting children too early. So here's something pastoral. I'm just a ruling elder, but these pastors know that ruling elders have pastoral duties. You don't have to admit a child as soon as they express faith in Christ. It's hard to judge a child, but you can tell them, if you believe in Jesus, you're a Christian. And just because the elders don't think you're ready to receive the sacrament doesn't mean you're not a believer. Doesn't mean you wouldn't go to heaven if you died right now. You should believe in Jesus today. Faith is what you must have. A credible profession might come well after the faith. But any thoughts on that, gentlemen, before we move on?
Yeah, I'd be with Bavinck and Augustine, who said that you don't really get anything different in the Lord's Supper than you get in the Word. And so you're not really withholding something from someone that you think, I want them to take the supper, but they're not ready to vote for elders. I just tend to think that the discernment that helps you discern the body is on the same level of discerning who should and should not be an officer in the church. And there may be other, again, NAPARC denominations that will allow for the setting on that. But we are, I believe, the only one that has preserved the preliminary principles. And it's just hard for me to square preliminary principle number 6 and this principle with setting an age limit.
Oh, so, that was my other hot take, actually, is why do we think that a child who's ready to participate in a something divine, a sacrament, not arguing for any weird views on the sacrament here, but the means of grace, it's very important. It's a heavenly thing. And why do we think somehow you need to possess less mental capacity to participate in something holy than you need to participate in the election of officers, which is something that is far less heavy and grave. It is heavy and grave, but the election of officers is a process that we invented in order to promulgate Presbyterian principles. But it's just, you see what I'm saying? Like, How
We
is that?
invented the election of elders, Zoe?
We
I'm-
didn't
I'm
old-
invent
I'm
it,
old
but
enough
the
to remember.
process, the voting process, the specific way in which that works, like we wrote out what was, clearly in the we expounded on what was in the Bible. But the sacrament is a little bit more, there's a word I'm looking for and I'm not finding it, but thinking that a child is not eligible to participate in something that is like an election of men, but they're able to participate in the Lord's Supper, which is a little bit more grave. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if I'm making
Well,
any sense.
hold on.
But
You-
I'm
you're
old
not-
enough to remember when the PCA struck down the word grave in one of its processes. My memory fails me.
qualification for elders.
I forget which host of this show actually spoke at the microphone at PCAGA in support of keeping
name-
grave.
His name was Don Quixote.
Keep the rave in grave. That's what I always say, man.
So, yeah. All right. Well, again, we've talked about this longer than we probably thought we would, but it touches on a number of real world issues that I think people, and especially church officers, can relate to. So let's leave this one behind. And Jared, I'll let you pick the next overture, as it were.
Oh, I would love for Scott to explain what in the world is going on in 32, 38, and 39, and why that's so important, and why Scott might be at fault.
Well, I would say that out of this bumper crop of overtures, as the stated clerk has called it, that 32, 38, and 39 are probably the most important ones, in my opinion. Overture 32, 38, and 39 are dealing with issues that arise when a man has already been found guilty of a sin and under censure. And how does one escalate that censure if he remains unrepentant? And so, at least according to the discretion of the court. And so we had an
So
issue in
this is
Indiana
an
where-
officer or a pastor,
Mhm.
right?
yeah, or church member even. I guess it would extend. It would extend to any escalation of a censure. In Ileana, we had a minister that was found guilty in 2020 of something, and in that, over the last 5 years or so, the presbytery has struggled to discern repentance of the man and has not been satisfied by his repentance. And so the question arose, well, how do we move forward with that? And a few years ago, right when I got into the presbytery, the court decided to depose and excommunicate the man without any process, just by declaration. That man sent an appeal up to the SJC, and it was overturned. But what the issue was there's already precedent in the PCA for doing what we did. And so the SJC disagreed with a previous or prior SJC on how you escalate a censure from perhaps indefinite suspension to deposition or even excommunication.
So deposition would be removal from office.
Mhm.
Excommunication is removal from the visible church.
Yeah.
So some people are listening to this and they're Baptist and they think, well, why don't you just vote them out? But one of the reasons, well, when you get in the middle of a discipline process, when you're right in the middle of it, that's a difficult time, because where do you go from there? It's hard to get into a state of a conviction with someone, but then after you do, where do you go from there? So this may seem strange to people, but we take it seriously.
Yep.
Some people persist.
There are churches out there that this would actually, I think, affect, because I'm sure there are many churches that have indefinitely suspended somebody, and then after a while, if they haven't responded, without doing a new trial, have just excommunicated. And this would make sure that you're not going to get flagged and get in trouble for doing that.
And so the issue was we had escalated a censure to excommunication upon a person without additional process. And so the question of the SJC that they're trying to resolve here is, Well, you can't just do that. You can't by by declaration, I declare bankruptcy and now you're bankrupt. You can't do that in the PCA to excommunicate or depose someone. But it also seemed kind of it was too cumbersome for a presbytery to start a whole entire new trial for that same man who's already found guilty. I think the Houston Metro Presbytery's Overture says de novo process, which is to start a trial anew. And so the SJC and those who wrote this overture, along with the other two overtures, the men that were on the SJC, are trying to find a middle path where it's like, well, it's probably the person who's been found guilty and that has been sustained in his guilt. You already have an entire case of record on this man for this issue. If he's unrepentant and he is contumacious in that unrepentance, then there should be some mechanism that's not a whole entire new trial. Our presbytery, to be honest and frank, we don't have a whole new trial worth of gas in our tank. It's been a matter for 5 years that we've been dealing with. There has to be some sort of middle compromise, and that's what these overtures seek to provide. And so I think Overture 32 and 39 are the ones I personally like. Would be okay with both of them passed. But it creates a middle way to make process easier for everyone, whether you're the accused or not. Because going through a whole new trial with whole new specifications and whole new witness, whole new indictment, if you're trying to seek to escalate a suspension to a deposition, is just too much. And so this is a compromise between just declaring and doing a whole new trial.
Yeah, and I should say that the PCA, specifically Presbyterian churches in general, they don't have all this process because they want it to be incredibly complicated. It's to protect primarily the rights of the accused, but also to guide the church courts. But in our desire to protect everyone, we've made it hard for everyone. It seems. So it's just something we have to work through. I think having nothing, making up the procedure ad hoc, would be worse. And if you're going to be connected to other churches, you have to have a common process. Other churches can't judge what you're doing if we're not all playing with the same rules. And it's difficult. Some people, a very small number of sociopaths enjoy this, and the rest of us just try to make it work and live with it. And I'm not saying that there are any of those sociopaths on the show tonight. That's not what I'm implying. I wouldn't say 3 out of 5 of you are some kind of weirdo. That's just not what I was going to imply at any point. But it's instructive, and that's one of the reasons we talk a while about a certain overture, because it touches on a lot of other things, and we're touching on concepts and foundational elements of polity here, which is the rights of the accused, but also the right of the session or the presbytery to take action and to investigate and to come up with a finding.
Yep. Yeah, I would say if we decided not to amend the book, the SJC actually voted to recommend what it's recommending here.
That's standing judicial commission.
I'm going to see how many times I can get you to define things.
Yeah, I know.
As we go through, the AC hasn't offered any advice on this overture. I'm just kidding. But if this is what the SJC told us to do, they're trying to constitutionalize it because of, I think, past precedent and confusion. But if you had to go through a whole new process, starting from the beginning, from scratch, every time, I think it would hurt the church in that it would force the court to have a heavier hand with offenses. Because if you just suspend a man from the ministry indefinitely, he's going to be on your rolls until you're satisfied. And if you wanted to escalate that, going to a whole new trial, you'd just be more tempted to depose him from the get-go. And so I think this prevents courts from being heavier-handed, knowing that it's difficult to increase a censure without a provision like this. And so I think it's better for everyone in that regard. And we should pass some version of it in a few weeks here.
Okay, what next should we talk about? Well, let's go ahead. Let's jump to. Let's just go ahead and hit. Let's do Fred Greco's. Last year we had an overture that was passed from an individual teaching elder, and teaching elder Fred Greco, who should be on the show next week. He's in this Houston Metro Presbytery and can be presumed to be active in the other couple of overtures from there. He has another one that didn't pass the Presbytery, but he has the right. That's another thing. We have a lot of rights in Presbyterianism. An individual officer, elder, has the right to send something to the General Assembly directly. It's a higher hurdle to get it passed, but he has an overture here, number 33. If you're playing overture bingo at home, and it is entitled "The Examination of Young Persons for the Admission to the Sealing Ordinances." So this sort of touches on, maybe it's another aspect of what the voting age overture was meant to address. So it looks like we're adding a sentence it's about the reception of new members. And this is giving direction on what the examination of a young person would be. And let me read the added section to BCO 57.2. The examination shall include an evaluation of the young person's credible profession of faith, the young person's understanding of the meaning of the Lord's Supper, and the young person's understanding of the questions in BCO 57.5, which I presume are the membership vows. This probably addresses the fact that especially some churches that admit 4-year-olds to the table, if they say, "I believe in Jesus, he's my Savior, he died for my sins," they're accepted into membership in some places. This is, you can't make sessions do anything in the privacy of their session room, but what, Jared and Scott, do you think of this instruction? I mean, it's what good sessions do anyway, but is it of any use to everyone else?
I think it's implied that everybody would do this. I don't know any church that would not do this, and so that might actually kill it because people might think, well, yeah, this is what you do already, or it might just be like okay, that's obvious. I have no idea what will happen with this because overtures from a person don't fare well, but this seems obvious. It's just whether or not you need to state the obvious, and I guess some people say yes, some people say no.
Well, I've been on review of records, never RPR, but there are some pretty crazy things done in local churches, and because especially churches that maybe in the past have been sort of in the Federal Vision orbit or attracted, paedo communion attracted, although not practicing because you can't practice it. Maybe they do have we talk about an age-appropriate confession sometimes, but I think what this is saying, you need to understand the membership vows. You can't just say, "I've got Jesus in my heart." Jesus died on the cross. So any thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah, not much outside of that. Near the end in the rationale, it talks about this is a companion overture with Overture 22. And so that was what we just talked about. And so in some ways they go hand in hand. Whether you would adopt both or not is a different discussion, but they're in the same wheelhouse of addressing a similar issue with young people and profession and what they're able to do in the context of church ministry and what they're not.
Yeah, and most overtures are meant to. I mean, this is an overture to change the Constitution. It's not just asking the GA to say this, but most overtures are the attempt to fix a problem or a perceived problem, and that's the way it is. You can't get away from that. To say that we have no problems would be silly, and sometimes we try to fix them all in 1 year with 50 overtures, and sometimes there's it's very helpful and it's good. I like this one because I think I know that it would be again, you can't make anyone do anything. This is almost pious advice, but it would be constitutional pious advice. All right, so what next? Young men.
It'd be interesting to talk about committees. There's so many overtures that are asking for committees, and yet I wonder if we're going to end up with any committees. I mean, there's of course 3 and 4 that was been talked about, the Christian nationalism. There's 26, which asks for an ad interim committee for directory of worship. There's 27 that asks for the kind of the Presbyterian version of Doge, Department of Presbyterian Efficiency or something. We've heard there might be
dope.
more.
Say dope.
27, the dope overture. There may be an asking for, I think there's one that's been talked about online about a committee on AI. And so there's a lot that are asked for, but I wonder if this is the GA in which all committees are kind of dead on arrival. It's there hasn't been a committee for a while.
Yeah, let's talk about why study committees have sort of got a bad odor about them in the PCA. The administrative committee doesn't like them because they cost money, and that's unbudgeted money. Some of these committees come with a commitment of money from a presbytery for all or part, usually part of the expense. You may ask, why do they cost money? Well, sometimes they like to meet in person. Sometimes they bring experts in. I'm not sure with Zoom why you have to have any budget. I'm sure that's naive. These committees take on a life of their own. I think we had one a couple of years ago that had its own website and did have probably paid consultants and witnesses.
DoorDash delivery fees.
I don't know that could be. I don't know. Yeah, I think that, Resby, the first time I ever had delivered food, I think you ordered sandwiches for us in Atlanta. So that was a red letter day for me. But study committees, they're big and long and unwieldy, and again, the administration doesn't like them because they cost money, and I think there'll be another overture. There'll be another study committee someday, but I'm not sure again if this is the year for them. So 2 committees on Christian nationalism. Somebody on this feed tonight has written an alternative to that, which would be a much simpler process.
Wow, I wonder who that could be.
A much shorter output. A less lengthy output.
Would that count as a study committee?
No.
Would that count under that ad hoc committee kind of thing?
It's a little committee appointed by the moderator.
Is there anything like a little committee in Presbyterianism?
It's mini. Yes, it's fun size.
It's like if you gave a study committee
Fundamental
Ozempic.
size?
A committee skirt.
Fundamentalist size. That's good. I'm going to use that in our next show.
Oh,
somewhere.
you probably will. Yes. So anyway, there's the Christian nationalism 2 that'll get rolled into 1. I don't. It'll be interesting to see how long that is. Who's doing home improvement there? Let me mute yourself.
That's Scott.
Okay. Yeah.
He's building a shed back there.
Yeah. Well, see, Jared makes his wife work at night. That's when all the home improvement goes on while he's on a podcast. So the 2 overtures, 3 and 4, asking for Christian nationalism study committees will be rolled together. That's one. I don't think it'll pass. And then what are the other ones? We know there's one coming on AI. That might be a worthy issue. It may be a little early for it, but I'm not sure how much passion anyone has for it. And what else besides that one? There's one on the
worship.
Yeah, and what number is that? Does anyone
26.
remember? Okay, we'll get to that. And so there's the idea that we need a constitutional, again, I'm going to explain briefly. We've only got a few chapters constitutional, in other words, binding upon the churches and the practice of the churches. We're unique among Presbyterian denominations in not having a binding or constitutional directory for worship. And there's some desire from some quarters to have that. I think it's generally the constitutionalization of the section on preaching. It failed last year, and I think general consensus we can't just constitutionalize the entire directory as it now exists. So this overture would put together a committee to kind of suggest a new directory or the process to get one or something. So let's see what the therefore is. Form an ad hoc committee to finish the work of revising the directory for worship that's not yet given full authority. And it says utilizing various NAPARC denominations directories as a guide. That's a deal killer for some people. Some people don't have much regard for our sister denominations in NAPARC. Include scriptural and confessional references. Present various chapters. So this is chapters, not a whole new directory for adoption until the work is complete. So I think this one will have an uphill climb, but it's good to keep the issue before us. Jared, you've written on the directory somewhat. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I wrote an article on the history of it. There's another one I have that's just going to talk about the reasons why this might be a good idea or helpful. And one of them is just the help sessions. We have a directory for worship that is mostly from the 1930s, is not dealing with issues that we're dealing with today. Some of the directions nobody follows in terms of maybe offerings, or it suggests to sing the doxology at the beginning where nobody does it. And it actually has come up. There's an SJC case that's interesting to read through where this issue came up because a session was trying to limit and exercise some authority over worship. And the question comes up, to what degree is the session supposed to be using the directory? Because it's a non-constitutional directory for worship, but there's a constitutional provision in BCO, 12.5e that says use the directory to make your worship, which shows the BCO assumed that the directory would be constitutional at some point. And so finishing that work, I think, is a good idea. There's just people who are afraid that it will be used to really narrow what you can do in worship. Honestly, I think that we could probably agree to where 95% of people in the PCA would be fine with it. It's just, the 5% I think are pretty loud of things that they're doing that they don't want to be told to stop. So I think we have broad consensus, actually, and it would be nice to tell that to our people. The directory, I think, if you look at the BCO, one way to look at the BCO is protections for lay people. The first part of the BCO in the form of government is a protection for their roles to vote and to be a part of the officers. The second part is protections for discipline, to spell that out so that they have protections there. And then the third part is for worship. And I think it's worth having a large section that says in a few basic things that you have a right to have a sermon every week, and you have a right every week to have prayers and the singing of psalms and hymns. I don't think you have to have a whole lot spelled out of things that you have to have, but it's nice to have provisions that protect the laity in the area of worship too.
Yeah, and you don't want something so wacky and out of left field that it violates the conscience of your members. Everything can't be trimmed to suit the most sensitive conscience in the congregation, meaning the biggest weirdo, probably. But they're, like you said, they're reasonable expectations. One of the places we would get into trouble, some people's conscience would be violated by having a 12-year-old little girl, or maybe a non-communing 7-year-old, read scripture during the worship service, or help hand out the Lord's Supper, or some might even be scandalized by women speaking from, the lectern, the pulpit, reading scripture, leading in confession of faith, doing the pastoral prayer. I have actually seen PCA worship services where an unordained person, I know they were unordained because they were women, do the benediction, every part of the worship service except maybe the pre-sermon scripture reading and the sermon itself, including the benediction. I've seen that. And
Brad, you didn't tell me you were watching the Emmanuel Prez live stream.
No, it wasn't yours. No, it wasn't you all. You didn't feature.
I'm just kidding. We don't do that.
I know that.
I just have to say that for legal reasons.
But, somebody said, well, only a few people do that. Well, I don't think that makes it any less significant. But there are people who want to keep doing what they're doing. A lot of times, one of my problems with study committees, as with the Women in Ministry Study Committee from 7-8 years ago, its basic conclusion was some things are better than others, but just keep doing that thing that you're doing. And that's not what we want, but that's what a lot of people want. They want to do what they want to do. That's a human tendency and a desire, and anything that restricts is going to be opposed. So, any more to say about this one?
I was reading Coffin's comments. He just had his guide go out, and he says the same thing for every one of these study committees. He says, to paraphrase the U.S. president, study committees are not the solution, they are the problem. And so he just repeats that over and over and over again.
That's not convincing. Who's convinced by that? I'm not.
It's a good line, though. It's a good line.
It's a great line. It's a great line. If you look in your commissioner's handbook on the AC's advice for all of these, the current AC's recommendation is that the only way any of these study committees can currently pass, according to the AC, is if 2/3 of the assembly votes to amend the budgets of the ACs if they don't have proper funding. And so since none of these overtures have proper funding attached, the AC is recommending that it would take a 2/3 vote in order to change the budget in order to approve any of these, which if that is the case, I'm sure none of them will pass.
Yeah.
Though we've been in this situation before, and I don't know what has changed.
What about a study committee on study committees? Study committee reform.
Government bureaucracy.
The Department of Presbyterian Study. DOPS. No, doesn't work. Sorry, that was right off the top of my head.
I'm going to unethically use AI to figure out a better acronym for you.
Okay.
The Department of Unnecessary Committee Excellence, which you could shorten to DUNCE.
Dunce. There you go. No, that's a winner.
Who needs AI when you have Zoe here?
Committee eradication.
I spit out
unnecessary committee eradication. That's
it's
dunce.
Much better.
Okay.
So much better.
So that's going to catch fire and spread across the nation. Dunce. All right. What next?
There is that 27, which is on efficiency. It's
Presby Doge. That's what they're calling it. So explain that to us. It's a little, I don't know. It's a little vague. I think that's probably what kills it. But
well, I think the interesting thing was the AC seemed to say, well, not in its current form, but we're not entirely opposed to it of finding ways to save money. So either negative or refer to the next General Assembly to kind of fix some of the problems that they have with it, including funding for it. It's interesting to save money, but how are you going to fund this committee to save money, and what does it exactly look like? It's not a bad idea. I mean, if you could just send in suggestions, I have a few suggestions of things that could probably save money. So if there's just a comment box somewhere, maybe you can just put it at GA. There's a comment box, and you can just put in your constructive compliments in the box and move on.
This is going to be like the Office episodes suggestion box. It's going to be ugly. All right, so that's Presby Doge, as they say it. Well, it's really dope. Department of Presbyterian Efficiency. And
The only
again,
way to
I
make
think
the PCA government smaller is to make it larger.
so.
Only
We
one
need
of
an
us has
apartment.
actually, only one of us on this show has ever proposed something taken seriously enough to reduce this. And that was me. Got to disenfranchise.
Yeah, to take away the vote from all teaching elders. That's the Resby doctrine. So that needs
if you can
committee.
if you can reduce voting rights based on age, why not based on whether
Why
or
not
not you're
based on
teaching elder?
ordination?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, there should be. You could do like a fantasy draft, even.
Or fantasy, as some people say it. All right, so that's the Department of Presbyterian Efficiency. The problem is we don't have any Elons, or the good thing is we don't, maybe, depending on your perspective. What else? Oh, and that's a study committee too, and it's funded, so it's not going to happen. This is a fiery one, a provocative one, and it is in light of, let's see, let me get down there. It's basically asking MNA to apologize for something that they did, which they have done to some degree and rescinded an action, which is to have a website that dealt with illegal immigration. Some people read it as actually counseling people how to break or skirt or avoid law enforcement or to avoid the law. And it was, it wasn't open and shut. I get how people had a problem with it, and I didn't like it. But some of the criticism of it was over the top. But even in the MNA report, they apologized for this. But
MNA stands for Mission in North America.
Yeah,
You gotta help
very
you out
good.
there.
Explainer. That's our home mission board if you're a Baptist. Yeah, so MNA sort of stepped in it. They anytime church agencies venture into political issues, even if they don't really mean to, and they don't have, they're not trying to stir up political things or take a position. A lot of their advice was coming from what we would call NGOs. And most NGOs are in bed with governments or radical activist groups of one kind or another, or big business interests or something.
But they're called non-governmental.
That's right.
I thought.
Yeah, they'd like to be. It's
Ironic
aspirational.
titles ever.
Yeah, it is a terrible title. That's right. So it's not. It rubs me the wrong way in every way. They relied on a lot of outside activist organizations. And people were not happy about it. It received national publicity. And so this is an overture that asks the MNA to sort of fall on the sword and even apologize to some agencies of the federal government. So any thoughts on this one before we move on? But it is political adjacent for sure.
I'm interested in Zoe's hot takes on this bad boy.
I don't know if I have that many.
That makes one of us.
You're the only person ever, so congratulations. I don't know if I have any hot takes on this. The only thing is that if we send a letter to the government apologizing for not doing something illegal, but maybe encouraging someone to potentially do something illegal, are they going to investigate us in return, even though we didn't do anything illegal? I mean, that's really kind of just the logistical thing. The sentiment behind the overture, I understand, because anybody at a run-of-the-mill job, if they had posted something like this that accidentally may have been encouraging someone to break the law, they would have been fired.
Yeah.
So
if you break your parents' lamp as a kid and you can glue it back together and they don't notice, you don't send a letter saying I'm sorry for that.
that's the most Berenstein Bears analogy, but I kind of understand. Of course, the seriousness of it is more it's a discernment issue and then maybe a mission of the church issue. Like, M&A, what are you doing? But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about them firing somebody. I honestly am more interested to see the pushback against this overture. Somehow I feel like it won't get to the floor because it's so direct, but I kind of love that about it.
Yeah, it says fire some people.
I don't remember where I heard this, but I think someone was talking about how there should be an overture written up to reprimand whoever wrote this overture for intemperance, or to take down this overture due to intemperance. And honestly, I think that's kind of lame. I think the frankness is okay. It's okay to have some pushback on our agencies when they do really weird stuff.
Yeah,
But
we all know that the worst kind of intemperateness has to do with typeface and fonts.
intemperate fonts.
And it seems fine from that perspective, so I don't
Well,
have
if
any
a
problem
font
with it.
can be intemperate, then if a font can be intemperate, then this overture definitely is. But I'm not gonna hate on it. I just really am curious to see what kind of debate it will generate.
Yeah, it's incendiary, it's inflammatory, and some overtures, I mean, ideally, you wouldn't do overtures as just kind of an expression of sentiment or a shot across the bow, but that's been the case forever. That's nothing new.
The gremlin in me loves the fact that this is going to make the knives come out. The knives are going to come out, and it's just going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Yep. That's why we don't want female elders. They love to see blood.
That's why you should never ordain me, even if it becomes even if it becomes legal in the PCA. This is why I should never be ordained.
Yeah,
So,
it's not. Yeah,
Let that be a lesson to you.
Not going to happen. Okay, where else do we want to go, guys? We don't have to go a full hour and a half. We've been going about an hour, and we'll hit a few more, but I'm not going to wear anybody out because, again, we're going to have Fred Greco on next week, and we know he'll have the only right opinion on these things, and these won't matter. So what else do we have here? Okay, well, here's an interesting one. I like things that touch on, well, here's two. We'll do at least these two.
35?
One, well, we'll do 34, but two, because I think it's dead on arrival. Now, I'll just summarize it. It basically requires reporting of who your ruling elders and deacons are and whether they're ordained, well, their rightful titles. And maybe that's for ostensibly to make it easier to contact them, for presbyteries would be helpful to know who they're dealing with. But I think it's really, there've been a few versions of this over the years, and I've been involved in some, but not at this angle. We'd like to know. Of course, we had people admit last year in an assembly debate that they don't ordain their deacons because it hurts their feelings that women can't be ordained as deacons. So they don't ordain deacons anymore, which means they don't have deacons. This is an attempt, in my opinion, from Savannah River to put a little heat on that practice and help us figure out how many churches are not ordaining deacons. Any thoughts on that? I'm not gonna put it on the screen because we're not going to spend that much time on it. But this is sort of a shot, to me, it's sort of a shot across the bow overture. I don't think it'll pass, although I'd be happy enough if it did.
I think the one thing that goes against it is this is something that should be happening at the presbytery level. And so I think some people will say, hey, if this is a problem, do this in your presbytery. But
no presbyteries are doing it. No presbyteries are doing this.
There might be.
Well, again, but there have been no cases that made it to the SJC about the non-ordination of deacons, which amazes me. Now we have an overture that was made constitutional last year, which says you can't call an unordained person a deacon, but churches are still doing it. And it's sad that we have to go to the judicial route to address this. But this is an issue.
CCB was kind of funny in their report on this because they said it's in conflict because it says to report, who's doing the work of the deacons if there is no diaconate. And they said, well, the BCO already tells you that the elders are supposed to be doing this. So it's asking a question that says, are you doing what the BCO says to do, I guess. I thought that was kind of funny.
I didn't buy that particular bit of Committee on Constitutional Business Advice, who passed their hand over all the overtures. But
well, ideally, yes, that would be happening, but we know it isn't. It's kind of like what we discussed earlier in the show, and by we, I mean I inserted my opinion without being asked, but it's a mutual trust issue. If there were commonly agreed, and again, constitutionally speaking, it is in there, but it's not, the spirit of the Constitution is not agreed upon in so many different areas. And in a sense, you have to let people use their, like a session can use their prudence to admit children to the table, and the same way that, you would assume that churches are using their discretion to elect and ordain elders and deacons. But it just seems so comically weird that someone wouldn't do that if you take it on its face as what our rules are, no one's going to think, oh, no one's going to believe you when you say people aren't doing this, even though they aren't doing it. And so it's an across the board church culture and like broad trust issue. And it's kind of hard to demonstrate that it is a problem because it's probably like a minority, but it's just really, it's very interesting because on its face, it's like, okay, no, that's not a problem because every church is supposed to ordain elders and deacons, but people just have to get it through their minds that that's not happening. And it may be rare, but it's not.
There's the issue that at an assembly-wide seminar in 2009 with Tim Keller and Ligon Duncan, Tim Keller admitted that they didn't lay hands on ordain their deacons anymore. We've published the recording here on PresbyCast, but he considered them deacons, but nobody ever made him ordain them. He would if they made him, but nobody ever did.
Well, see, that's a violation of the letter of the Constitution of the PCA
I agree.
The spirit. So, I mean, this.
I have to hand it to the Women's Study Committee though, because Kathy Keller was on there, and the Women's Study Committee said you need to ordain your deacons.
He said that was best aligned or something. Yeah, it was weak. It didn't change anything. And Kathy Keller wasn't the only author of that. And again, we don't have a problem with female elders, but we have people who think they have female deacons, and that'll irritate me as long as it's a thing. All right, this is an interesting one because we've talked about this before. GA meeting locations. Now that seems like not a big deal, but like, okay, think about your vacation. You don't just you care about where you go on vacation. If I said you have to go on vacation to the Pacific Northwest this year, you're going to think, well, I don't know about that. But but location matters. That's the point. And it's a hardship for some people to travel to far-flung places. Most of the PCA's membership is in the Southeast. That's where most of our assemblies are. But Scott, explain the provisions of this one. It's a study committee? No. It's request the administrative committee study, so there'd be no money. So this one could conceivably pass. And it's got a lot of research about where the study committees have been. And it's saying, let's figure something out where we rotate the assemblies and there's some balance between cost efficiency and convenience, but also, a consideration for people who live out west, up north, in Canada. So, what do you think about this, Scott? Are you currently a member of the AC, or you were? Which is it?
I am currently a member of the AC.
So this is going to be your job. You have to fix this problem.
Yeah, by voting in the affirmative on this, you would create a subcommittee on the AC. It's so riveting. And that subcommittee would be tasked with studying that subcommittee would be tasked to figure out basically a way forward. We have some, I think, serious issues in the PCA with our current post-COVID dealings with just pulling off the General Assembly. Right now, we need about 2,000 commissioners every year to basically stay like thin margined in the black or red. I think we're actually likely to, I can't remember which GA, we're going to lose money because of contract issues, just a little. And so it's the margins are very thin on pulling off the assembly currently. And so say if we go to Milwaukee in a few years and we're unable to maintain like 2,000 commissioners, we may run into a financial deficit. And so there is issue currently with trying to plan assemblies in a post-COVID era. They just are planned much differently. We need a place that's larger than we've ever needed, but not so large that it's actually like a convention city. And so we're in this weird middle place of what we need and what could actually host us. And so it's an interesting question. I think this is actually generally a good idea. We need to do more study on how to do this more efficiently because it's costing too much, even if that means we stay in like the same location every year. The current trajectory is unsustainable.
Yeah, I've got the fix for it. You do Atlanta and Las Vegas every other year. And Las Vegas is cheap, right?
How many men would be deposed for being in Las Vegas?
I can't believe you're suggesting things like that.
Never Vegas.
What in the world? It's been there before, I think. And Carl Robbins used to pastor out there, you know.
Yeah, there's actually a person in the AC that does a lot of the work on this, who also happens to be like the most delightful staff person in the AC. I had a like 10 or 15-minute conversation about this with her, and the factors that go into this are, have to deal with a city actually wanting a religious group in it, and so that limits you. And then a city that doesn't have a lot of options of things that will make more money too. So there's a lot of factors that go into this that I don't think people realize that limit our options on who can actually give us a really good deal on these.
I hope she emphasizes to the cities that we're not teetotalers, mostly, so that you don't have the Baptist loss of profit for the restaurants and hospitality industry, as they say.
Presbyterians tip pretty well too. So
yeah, yeah.
That's because we buy beer.
I'll say this: when I've been with a group of Presbyterian men from the church or from a General Assembly or Presbytery, whatever, without exception, they all treat women and waitresses and help well and tip extra well, just because we don't want to give offense or have a bad name. But I'm sure there's bad stuff that happens. But anyway, GA location, expense, all that. It's a perpetual problem.
Do it at Ridgehaven.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we get washed away in a flood. So it's a hazard.
They should do it at the Machen Conference and Retreat Center that the OPC owns. Where the last hour of the drive has zero cell reception. If you don't have XM, you're not listening to anything. And the last hour of the drive is on like a hunting road.
And it probably has 12 cabins.
That's an ambitious number. That's a really ambitious number.
First come, first served. Okay. All right. Any more we want to talk about before we shut down? Because I think we've gone far enough. Let's look at these latecomers. So there is.
I'm just really disappointed on the one that we heard rumors about that's not going to pass.
Yeah,
I agree.
We heard that we know a session wrote an overture that has to do with extraterrestrial, the possibility of discovering and confirming the existence of extraterrestrial life forms, aliens, little green men, something like that. And it was defeated at Presbytery, and we don't think the session's going to send it up. But we really wanted an assembly with AI and aliens and illegal aliens, because there's also, I have seen an overture that has passed that will come up, and it touches on illegal immigration.
The truth is out there.
Yeah, so why not?
Cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and
Just
yes,
trying to find home, man.
yes,
Sent
crypto.
up by teaching elder Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
So what are the chances of Elon and RFK Jr. just walking into the assembly this year? I think roughly zero. But the issues that they
But also somehow higher than ever.
So yeah, it's going to be a weird one. And then there's a shot at By Faith, although I think they say that they've cut their expenses even more. That's our denominational website magazine, although it's not a real magazine anymore. It's a weird title. Transition By Faith to a press release based publication. That's probably not going to be that well received. And then there's an overture, and this is based on a form that the AC really sent out asking for racial data of churches. And there's an overture from Calvary Presbytery number 42, which says don't do that. We're not going to have. We're going to be colorblind statistically, and that'll be an interesting one. And there's also another one to direct the AC to collect and report each congregation's public worship service times. And that's ostensibly so there would be a directory that anyone traveling could find it. I suspect that there's some desire to know how many churches really have a second or evening service.
I was about to say, it sounds like a tongue-in-cheek way to figure out who's got an evening service.
What you got to remember is about 60% of PCA churches report statistics regularly and accurately, so it would still be largely meaningless.
Though also there's like the RPCNA will tell you the start time of worship for all of their churches.
Oh, really?
It is helpful information.
Yeah, it would be good.
It
It would be good, but I think PCH people are like, or what's that? Mute yourself, Scott. They're like unherdable cats. So you can't really. PCA churches have a degree of independence and an independent streak in many cases, and they're not going to do much that they don't want to do, that they don't really have to do. But interesting. So there's an issue behind every one of these, and as you look at them, you'll be able to figure out some. And if you can't, ask someone, ask us, listen to future shows, ask your pastor, and I'll bet he can figure it out.
Yeah, so, don't ask me.
Just do that at your own peril, as they say. So, Scott and Jared, we're not going to wear you out, or the listener. We'll stop it there. There'll be at least one more show on this, and it's we appreciate it though. I'm sure some people have been helped. First time commissioners, people that are coming, trying to figure out what's going on. So these things will be debated in the Overtures Committee in the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Always good to get there early to view the Overtures Committee.
Yeah, and Scott and I are working on a Overtures document that you can put your notes in and tells you what the AC has said on things like that. So be looking for that in the near future too.
Okay, and Fred Greco's report will probably come out next week. David Coffin's is already floating around in the ether, and who knows, there may be another. So various of us will be linking to those things. And if it interests you, there'll be more than you can read between now and the General Assembly. So I think that's about it. And Zoe, you were reasonably well behaved tonight. And
thank you.
Yes, you're just keep it up. And Resby, you're still with us. So as an OPC person, former PCA, you'll just know that you don't have to worry about this too much, and you can thank our good listeners for listening.
Yeah, I mean, you can all make that transition if you want. It's remarkably easy.
One of the proposed names for the OPC when they had to rename it in 1937 was the True Presbyterian Church of the World, and I really wish they had gone with that one.
Amazing.
T-Pow. That would have been sweet. But thank you everyone for listening and coming on. I changed my avatar in hopes that we would talk about aliens. We didn't really talk about it a whole lot, but in the words of the picture's namesake, don't be an Erdman.
Glory to the Lamb of God, praise your holy name. Thank you, Jesus, for your blood you shed on Calvary. Precious, precious Jesus, you died more than for me. Angels stood and listened as redeemed ones sang. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, redeemed, your child and forever I am. Angels stood and listened as redeemed ones sang.
What's wrong with you people?